There is a man in Africa. He has never led a country. He has never commanded an army. He has never sat in the United Nations. And yet, Western government monitor his speeches. Western media calls him a threat. Western politicians say his name with fear. His name is Julius Malema. He leads the Economic Freedom Fighters, a party born from anger, built on the promise of land, fueled by the fury of millions. So, what has this man done to make the most powerful nation afraid? Stay with me. The answer is not what most people think. To understand Julius Malema, you must understand the world he was born into. He was born in 1981 in Seshego, a township in Limpopo. Apartheid was still the law of the land. Black South Africans could not vote. They could not own land in their own country. They could not live where they chose. His mother was a domestic worker. She cleaned the houses of white South Africans to feed her son. His father was absent. Julius Malema grew up watching his mother work in a country that did not value her life. That wound never healed. It became the fire that drove everything. When apartheid ended in 1994, many people celebrated. Nelson Mandela walked free. The ANC took power. The world applauded. But in the township of Limpopo, the soil was still owned by white farmers. The mines were still owned by white corporations. The banks were still controlled by white capitals. For young Julius Malema, freedom had arrived on paper, but not in the ground, not in the kitchen where his mother had worked, not in the stomach of a hungry child born on the wrong side of history. This was the boy who grew up to say things that made the West uncomfortable. We are getting to that. At the age of 9, Julius Malema joined the ANC Youth League, not because someone had told him to, because he believed in it. He was talented. He could speak. He could move a crowd. He understood power in a way most men did not. By the time he was a teenager, he was already a leader. In 2008, he became president of the ANC Youth League. He was 27 years old. From that platform, he began to say things that made the establishment nervous. He said the ANC was moving too slowly. He said black South Africans were still poor because the economic system had not changed. He said the land must be returned without compensation if necessary. Those words sent a shockwave through South Africa and far beyond its borders. Those words, land without compensation, are the words the West never forgave. We are going to explain why. Inside the ANC, the reaction was swift. The party leaders grew uncomfortable. His supporters called him a revolutionary. His critics called him reckless. But the people in the township called him their voice. For the first time in years, a South African politician was speaking out loud what millions had been waiting since 1994. That rainbow nation was a story told for the comfort of the world, not for the freedom of the poor. The tension inside the ANC grew. In 2013, Julius Malema launched the Economic Freedom Fighters. Red berets, red overalls, the color of revolution. The EFF was not just another political party. It was a statement, a provocation, a challenge to every comfortable assumption about post-apartheid South Africa. The demands of EFF was clear. Return the land to the people. Nationalize the mines and the banks. Build free education and free healthcare. And the system that kept black South African poor. In the first election they contested in 2014, they won 6.4% of the nation vote. That number does not sound large, but they were a brand new party with almost no resources, running against the ANC, the party of Nelson Mandela, which had ruled for 2 decades. 1.2 million South Africans voted for Malema in his very first election. But what happened inside Parliament after that is the moment the world started paying attention. Malema took his red berets into the Parliament. He turned it into something it had never been. A confrontation. He demanded that President Jacob Zuma answer for his spending 250 million rand of public money on upgrades to his home at Katla. When Parliament tried to silence him, the EFF refused to be silent. When the Speaker tried to remove them, they stood their ground. The scenes from South Africa went around the world. A man in a red beret standing in a government chamber, refusing to protect the powerful. For many Africans watching, it was extraordinary. For the political establishment in South Africa and beyond, it was deeply unsettling. Malema was not just disrupting South African politics, he was disrupting much larger. This is where the West enters the story. Julius Malema does not speak about South Africa alone. He speaks about Africa. He says the poverty of Africa is not accidental. He says it was designed. He says Western corporations and government have taken the wealth of Africa for centuries, and they are still doing it today. He says the International Monetary Fund uses debts to control African governments. He says Western mining companies take the resources of Africa and leave the people with nothing. He says African leaders who cooperate with the West are betraying their own people. These are not new ideas. Thomas Sankara said them. Kwame Nkrumah said them. Patrice Lumumba said them. But Malema says them in the age of social media, in the age of YouTube, in a language the use of Africa understood and the use of Africa unlisted. That, more than anything else, is what makes the West afraid. The last time Africans spoke like this it did not end well for Western interests. There is one issue above all others that has made Malema a target of the West. The land. South Africa is a country where white South Africans, about 8%, own 72% of private farmland. This is not a historical claim. Malema says this land was taken. He says it should be returned. He says the government should do this without paying the price for stolen land. When he says these things, Western media calls him dangerous. Western politicians call him radical. Western investors call him a threat. But the people living in sacks on the edge of farms, their families once worked. They call him the first politician who ever told the truth. The louder the West criticizes him, the larger his following grows. Ask yourself why. There is something else. Malema has refused to take sides in the war between the West and Russia and China. When the war in Ukraine began and Western countries demanded that Africa choose, Malema said no. He said Africa has its own history with war. He said Africa will not be told who to support, but the powers that once colonized this world landed hard in London, in Washington, in Brussels. South Africa is not a small country. It is the most industrialized economy in Africa. It is a member of BRICS. It sits at the tip of a continent of 1.4 billion people. And Julius Malema was not telling that continent it does not owe the West its loyalty. What happened next showed how seriously the West was taking this man. The South Africa Revenue Service investigated Malema for years. There were charges, there were court cases, there were headlines designed to destroy him. Every attempt to remove him from power or from politics has failed. In 2024, South Africa general election, the ANC lost its parliamentary majority for the first time since the end of apartheid. Julius Malema had helped change. If you are learning something new today, make sure you subscribe to African Profile. We publish a new story every week. Stories of African leaders that most of the world has never heard. Just hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Julius Malema is still alive. He is still fighting. His legacy is not yet finished, but something has already been left behind. He has changed the conversation about South Africa. He has changed the conversation about Africa. That change is permanent. Before, the EFF South African politics was a negotiation between the powerful. The debate was about management, about slow, careful reform. Julius Malema put a different question on the table. Reform for who? At what speed? And who gets left behind while the conversation continues? He gave voice to the impatience of millions. Young South Africans who grew up after apartheid but still inherited its poverty. Young Africans across the continent watching their resources while their roads stay broken. Here is what the West has never understood about Julius Malema. He is not the cause of the anger. He is the product of it. The anger existed long before him. It existed in every shack without running water. It existed in every child who walked 3 hours to school. It existed in every mine worker who died underground while the company reported profits. Malema did not create that anger. And in doing that, in speaking the unspeakable out loud, he forced a conversation that Africa and the West can no longer avoid. The question of who owns Africa, the questions of who benefits from Africa, the questions of whether formal colonialism ending was truly the end of extraction. These are not comfortable questions for the West, and that is exactly why they fear him. The stories of Julius Malema teaches us something that powerful government do not want us to know. When a leader is labeled dangerous, the first question you should ask is, dangerous to who? Malema has not bombed a city. He has not invaded a country. He has not stolen resources from anyone. He had spoken, and what he spoke about is the right of African people to control the land beneath their feet, the resources under their soil, and the future of their own country, continent. If those words are dangerous, ask yourself what they are dangerous to, because the answer is to the question tells you everything you need to know about who has been benefiting from the silence of Africa. The greatest leaders are not always the ones the world celebrates. Sometimes the ones the world fears are the ones the people need most. If this story made you think different, share it with one person who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, stories of African leaders who refused to be quiet, subscribe to African Profiles. A new story comes every week. And next, watch the story of Thomas Sankara, the African president they could not silence with words, as they silence him in another way, because that story connects directly to what you just learned here.